All right, I am back under the camper, and I've been really taking my time getting back to this project because this has not been fun. You know, I've made the decision on this project to really tackle a lot of the difficult stuff first. You know, last year I spent the whole summer stripping paint, and this year I really wanted to focus on getting the inside gutted and getting the belly pan out and starting to put this thing back together. But as I film this, it's the beginning of August, and I've only gotten the demo done and half this belly pan off because it has just been so hot here in Tennessee. So I'm forcing myself to get out here today. I really don't feel like it. I'm just sweating, just sitting here. I haven't even started working and I'm covered in sweat. But if I don't keep going, this is never going to get done, and I really want to keep pushing forward. I think once I get through some of these difficult tasks, it's going to be a lot easier to be motivated to do the fun ones. Well, the small part of me that considered not removing the bottom from this thing has been officially convinced. This is all one sheet on the bottom just about, and so because the axles are installed, I can't really remove it and replace it as one sheet. So I made a really rough cut across the middle, and I will say this is a template, but now that this is down, you can see how messed up it is. At every spot where it was connected to the frame, there's huge holes. That's probably a 1" by 3" hole just in that one spot. And there is visible wetness in a lot of spots here, even with the inside being sealed. It's raining down wood chips. I see there's like a 1x2 that used to be attached to something here. So this is going to give me a chance to see what's going on under here, get this repaired. So for now, I'm going to strip this insulation off and just pull down what I can in there, and then I think I'm going to come back another day. This is a lot being on your back working, so we'll get this started, kind of start figuring out a plan and see how bad it is under there. Okay, so we got it cleaned off here. You can kind of see where all the steel framing was. Any of those kind of rust colored lines are where this attached. And unfortunately, this is aluminum and it was on the steel frame. And so you can see all these holes that are right where the screws were holding it against the frame. And so that's called galvanic corrosion, two dissimilar metals being connected to each other. causes them to corrode at a higher rate. So unfortunately, the way this was designed, they're touching like that. When we put this back, we're going to put some sort of tape on the frame to ensure that they're not touching. All right, I'm down to the last piece of metal that's got to come out. It's the piece that's in between or above the axles, I should say. I had hoped that this was cut in between the leaf spring mounts and could slide right out, but you can kind of see right here, it actually tucks up behind it in a bunch of areas. And so this is not going to come out without a little bit of cutting and a little bit of fighting. So what I'm gonna have to do is make a cut front to back on this piece, and I'm just going to do that with a combination of snips and a grinder with a cutting wheel, and I'm just going to try to relieve some of the width off of this. I don't really know how much I'm going to take off. I'm just going to start cutting and see where it's easiest to access, and this might happen in a number of pieces, but basically that's what we got left. There's still a lot to come out of here. There's insulation and ducting and plumbing and rotted trailer frame pieces that I have to evaluate how we're going to fix. I'm really glad I took this bottom off though. I really didn't want to do this, but there's just a lot of moldy insulation under here, and I think if I had left this thing never would have smelled right. And I'll show you guys in a little bit here. I discovered the one frame rail is just completely rusted, so even from a safety perspective, I'm really glad I did this. So let's see if we can get this piece out, and then we'll deal with the rest of that. All right, so I got the last piece of metal out. Finally, I have a little bit more of a clear picture of what's going on under here, although there's still a lot of this foam insulation board that's hanging down back here. And what that was just to create an insulated space under the floor where all the ducting and the pipes and everything would stay heated if this was used in the winter. I'm not going to be recreating that, so I'm just getting all of it out at this point. There's a lot of fiberglass that's jammed up kind of on the outsides of this, and so my goal right now is to get all the fiberglass out and get as much of this foam board down as I can in the next little bit of time here. I've got a dust mask, I've got my long sleeves, I got my gloves on, and so we're going to dive in and just try to get this really annoying dirty part out of the way so that we can make some progress and not have to be getting gross every single time I come under here. All right, this trailer is gutted. Finally, I never thought this would take this long. It's October. It's now a full year almost after I sprayed primer on this. I thought this thing would be insulated by now. It was a lot the first year, and I definitely burned myself out. And so now that I'm getting to the inside and actually putting things back together, I just recognize I have to take this a chunk at a time and not overdo it. This is a marathon, not a sprint. So the point we're at now is all the walls inside have been removed. The belly pan underneath has been removed. All the old moldy insulation and ducting and broken plumbing and old gas lines and just all of that is gone. And so now I can start figuring out what is actually left here, and it's a lot. Some things are better than I thought, some things are worse than I thought. We've got rot in the frame. I've got at least 2 spots in the main frame rails that I have to cut out a section and weld in a new piece of metal. And then we've got some rotted cross members in similar areas where just moisture must have been sitting. And so all that's going away. I have to cut all that out, put new metal in. I'm hoping to do that once I get a little further along. In the meantime, I'm focusing on the wood rot issue. And so we've got a number of issues that have wood rot. We've got a bunch of windows where the corners leaked. And so you can see behind me here, I've actually started to remove the frame from this window because 2 sides of it were rotted. And so it's just a lot of that. It's just piecing things together. This window here has already had that, and it's already been put back together and temporarily set on spacers. This is going to be good until we do our final assembly. Now you might remember, if you've been following along, this is not the first time I took these windows out and put them back in. I had hoped that the first time I did it would be the last. I took them out, I cleaned them, I put new butyl tape on them, and I sandwiched them on in the openings on the old interior walls, hoping that squeezing them like that for a few months in the summer sun would really lock them into place and they'd be good. Found out the following winter, all that butyl tape got cold, it lost some of its stickiness, and it wasn't being sandwiched anymore. The windows started to fall out. One actually did fall out, landed on the ground. Thankfully it didn't break. But what I realized is that process of letting them sit wasn't going to work. So now that I know that, I'm going through again and I'm installing them all temporarily with a few screws, sandwiching the inside, however, using these spacers instead of the old wall coverings. My hope is I can leave them like that until I do the final assembly of the walls in here, and then I can quickly remove the spacers, put the walls on, put it back together, and not have to do this a third time. If I had a garage, none of this would be necessary. I could just park it inside, pull the windows, finish this project, and then put them in at the end. I don't have that luxury, so it may take 3 times. So I'm trying to be careful, but I'm also recognizing this might not be the last time I do it. So all that said, we're gonna start framing. We're cutting new pieces of wood to match what was here to sit inside the aluminum pieces. And little by little, we're gonna work our way around. The side windows are the easiest. They just have a simple 4-sided frame. I'm using screws to attach them to the aluminum and then also to themselves instead of the staples that were there before. Some say you shouldn't be doing this from the inside. That is true on some of this, but I think for most of this, I can build it just fine because it is reinforced by this aluminum. The front and back, however, are a whole other ballgame. The back especially, there's all this plywood that's just gone. And so it's gonna be just a slow process of tediously putting pieces in to build up the structure that was there, probably removing some screws on the outside, installing the wood, reinstalling the screws, things like that, just to make all this work. So I'm gonna learn as I go, figure this out. We're gonna try to get all this wood framing and then replace some wood on the subfloor that's been damaged, and then move over to the metal framing, get that knocked out, and then we can hopefully move on from there. I knew a lot of this was here. It's just a bummer to have to be doing it, but it is what it is. I'm glad I pulled this out. There's a lot of mold. just a lot of rot. So this is definitely the right thing to do. And I think a lot of people drive around in these vintage campers and say, oh, there's just a little water spot. And chances are, if the water spot that you saw is even visible, what's behind it is much worse. Mold, rotten metal, rotten wood. They really can make this camper like this dangerous to drive around. So this is a lot of work, but I'm glad we're doing it. So let's get to some of this framing. All right, this window is framed. Thankfully, this just had a bottom and the left had to be replaced. The top and the right, I left. And so what I'm doing is basically cutting uprights, and then I'm installing a new deck screw in the top and the bottom through the aluminum, drilling a hole. And then for the side supports, I'm using a countersinking bit that does a pilot and a clearance hole all in one, and making sure everything's nice and flush, and reinstalling these plastic corners that were here. So I've got two new risers here, and then up here I couldn't get a screw from the outside, so I opted to use a pocket hole to attach that. And this is actually a lot sturdier than it was. I was debating replacing all this, but this actually feels pretty decent, and I think once it has a covering on it, it's going to be really strong. So I think we'll keep it simple and we'll leave it at that. Next step is going to be to get some flashing tape on here, which is a step that was not done from the factory, but we're gonna do just in case water ever gets in here again. All right, the next step is going to be to just rip a bunch of 1/4-inch spacers. These are going to be to simulate the wall, the finished wall thickness. And so I've got all the side windows are ready to go. And before I dive into the front and back, which are a little more complicated, we're going to get these sides in. So I'm going to get these spacers made, get them cut, get them tacked on the wall just temporarily, and then we'll start getting these windows back in. One of the humbling parts of this project is that just when you think you've got this figured out, something doesn't work out the way you wanted it to. If you've been following along with this series, you will feel like this is a little familiar, and that's because it is. I've had these windows out twice now, and now that they're back in, I'm gonna have to cut this butyl tape back. When you do any sort of research on these types of projects, everyone says, don't caulk the windows, do it the right way, use butyl tape, and that is the right way. However, when you've got a situation like mine here where the openings were cut a little big from the factory, and no matter how many times you use butyl tape and you shim the windows and try to find the right spot, there's still water coming in. So I'm going to show you that here. So you can see here, Got water coming in here. Butyl tape's not doing the trick, so that's why we're caulking. So what we're doing now is we're going to come through, we're going to cut this extra butyl tape out and we're going to caulk it. I've got one window that's really leaking even after being taken out twice and having the whole frame rebuilt. And then, you know, really I've just decided that I'm going to caulk all of them, not only for a little more insurance, but also when you paint this, I had to use this thicker butyl tape in order to get it to seal with the ridges here. When I primed this, I learned that the masking tape I used peeled the butyl tape out something terrible. And so there's not really going to be a good way to mask this without having something over this tape. So just like last time, what we're going to do is we're going to use a combination of probably a knife as well as a plastic razor. This is what we use when we strip the paint, and basically come in here and back cut this so that we can have room for caulk without it sticking out too far. So we're just going to take our time. We're going to start going around window by window. This window and the corresponding one on the other side are the ones that I've seen some water come in. So I'm going to do these first, but I'm going to work my way around and reseal all the windows that are in. I don't have the back one swapped out yet. We've got a bunch of wood framing to do in there, and I've got some, we're going to do a few things differently. So in an upcoming video, it's going to get a little crazy before I get to that. But in the meantime, we're going to seal these up and make sure the water can't get in. Well, I learned some things, which is a really nice way of saying that did not go as planned. Losing the sun pretty fast here, so I went and just did all that without talking too much. I scraped it all back. I put tape down thinking that I could probably control how much the caulk came out onto the exterior walls with that tape, which went really well until I removed the tape, and it created a rough edge. And even though I'm in the shade and it's a pretty cool day today, that caulk had set up enough that it didn't want to tool nicely a second time. So the good news is, going forward, what I will do is skip the tape. I think I can control it better without it. I only have to do it once that way. Otherwise, everything seems to have gone okay. The top of this is a little rough looking, so I'm going to let it dry, and I'll probably slice some of that out and put a fresh layer over just so it looks good. But this window's sealed. You may have also noticed I taped the bottom but didn't caulk the bottom. I wasn't thinking, and I taped all the way around, but I didn't do the bottom because water is not likely going to go up enough to get past this butyl tape. And if water was to get trapped in there, we want it to be able to get out. So left the bottom uncaulked, but the sides of the top and just a little bit wrapped around the bottom is all done. So this is a good test. I'm gonna let this sit overnight, make sure it doesn't react weird with the butyl tape or anything like that, and then we can tackle the other windows. Okay, so I promised you guys I was going to show you some of the damage underneath. I'm going to hold off on that till the next video. We're going to take this in a different direction than I expected. It's going to be, this is turning into a really intense project in the next video. So I'd really appreciate it if you guys could subscribe and follow along. And I appreciate all of you who have watched for this long. I never thought this many people would even be interested in this. So I'm really humbled and honored to have you guys here along with this process. So we'll see you on the next one.